What is up, guys? Chick Kackis is Bacchus. Thank you so much for stopping by, and today
we are going to be taking a closer look at one of the highlights of the most recent update that hit Destiny 2 Season of Dawn. You know, the one that deleted everyone's currency and they had to shut the game down for an entire day to get it back. That one. But that whole kerfuffle aside, there was some very interesting buffs and nerfs that arrived via this hotfix. And the one we're focusing on today is to the Breakneck Gambit Pinnacle Auto Rifle. This matters quite a bit because this gun was set up to be absolutely phenomenal with Shadowkeep. Seriously, a lot of people were speculating that the Breakneck would become the most powerful PvE auto rifle in the game due to some very specific balancing involving PvE, because with the arrival of the Shadowkeep expansion back in September, there was a pretty big PvE pass to most of the gun types in the game, and a lot of them saw decent PvE buffs, so buffs against combatant damage, and usually that damage wasn't a flat damage like 10% more damage in all scenarios, but it had a range from the red bars to bosses. Auto rifles got one of the biggest of these buffs, from 20% to 30% of a damage buff depending on what enemies you're facing in PvE. And again, this was back in Shadowkeep. And so because of that, there have been auto rifles, especially I'm thinking of the Steel Feather Repeater that's farmable from the Sundial activity, and that can get multi-kill clip Feeding Frenzy. That thing has risen to prominence and is becoming more and more utilized. But why did the Breakneck get all this hype and then kind of fall into nothingness? Well, it's because while auto rifles in general were getting that big PvE buff, the Breakneck specifically got hit by the most random nerf during this exact same time. With Shadowkeep, the Breakneck's special perk Onslaught, which makes it so that this weapon's rate of fire increases as you stack Rampage, well, before it would just straight up increase rate of fire while maintaining that same amount of damage from Rampage. Well, it actually got reduced so that as your rate of fire increased with the Breakneck, you'd actually be doing less and less damage. So as those stacks went higher, your rate of fire did go higher as well, but your damage went lower. And so that nerf kind of made it so that the Breakneck just wasn't able to compete with a lot of the other legendary options out there. In fact, if you want to know how bad it was, the Breakneck, when it was in its fastest rate of fire form, was actually putting out less DPS than a normal 720 rounds per minute auto rifle, which of course makes no sense at all, especially since Rampage is involved. But again, with this update, the Breakneck was specifically buffed. So is it finally its time to shine? Will this buff combine with the previous auto rifle buff to finally put this thing at the top of the heap for PvE auto rifles, which most people expected it to be? Well, I actually went and got some pre and post update footage so we can see just how significant that buff was. And so, let's take a look. So, with no stacks of Rampage against this Warbeast, it's doing 1,619 damage. We then get it up to Rampage times 1, and then it does 1,603 damage, and there we can see the effect of the nerf doing less damage than before, even though it has a stack of Rampage. Then with Rampage times 2, 1,568 damage to the head, and moving on lastly, Rampage times 3, 1,508 damage. So we're now switching over to gameplay captured after the update. All of the factors are identical, same light levels, everything. And this time, normally we do 1,619 damage, so exactly the same as before. Then with Rampage times 1, instead of 1,603, we're doing 1,615 damage, so a slight buff there. Then things get super weird. For Rampage times 2, again, we went down from normal to Rampage times 1 in damage, but Rampage times 2 goes up in damage, getting 1,777 damage for a headshot. Very weird, but things get even weirder. With 3 stacks of Rampage, we go back down in damage to the pre-update 1508 damage, and I was able to replicate this multiple times. I was weirded out when I was testing this, so I was doing this again and again, and it was the same values every single time. So I don't know what the heck is going on there at Bungie, but for some reason this gun is now going to go down in damage, way up in damage. Rampage times 2, the Breakneck is now at its most deadly, and then it's going to go back down to the pre-update damage, so that makes no sense at all. And in the background, I'm actually showing just some gameplay of getting it to Rampage times 3 and then taking on this Ogre, just seeing like how much damage like a magazine of Breakneck can really do. And as you can see, pretty consistent. We switch over to the new footage, and the funny part is that when it's Rampage times 3, again, doing the exact same damage against this Ogre of 667. The funny part is that the biggest chunk is taken out of this Ogre, as you may have suspected, when I'm at Rampage times 2. Like, I get to Rampage times 2 and then I engage this guy, I do a much bigger chunk than times 3. And to break down these numbers even further, normally it's the exact same damage, 0% increase. With Rampage times 1, you're now getting a less than 1% damage increase. By my calculations, it was around 0.8% damage increase. Then at times 2, you're getting a pretty substantial 11% damage increase versus previous before the update. And then with Rampage times 3, you're getting a 0% damage increase. So those are the cold hard numbers. What the heck do you make of this? Like, I was not expecting this. Obviously, I captured the pre-update footage thinking, well, this thing is getting a buff. This could be a big deal. Again, this is a very powerful and unique weapon. Pinnacle weapons like the Recluse, Mountaintop, they have been extremely powerful. These are not weapons to be taken lightly, but I am weirded out by these numbers. Like, completely weirded out. This makes absolutely no sense for it to go down in damage, jump back up, and be most powerful at times 2, and then if you get a kill at times 2, you're punished and you're doing even less damage and seemingly less damage output as well, less DPS as well with times 3 versus times 2. So funny enough, although obviously I'm focusing on it in PvE and I'm a PvE mainly guy, because times 2 is the sweet spot, that might actually be easier to activate in PvP. And then when you get that times 2 kill, you're slaying out. However, let's take a step away from the absolute weirdness of the numbers and talk about this weapon's actual performance, because I did run the updated version through several activities, and the Breakneck is still a pretty darn powerful auto rifle. The fact that it's constantly getting Rampage, and yes, it's doing less damage, but that increase in rate of fire will usually result in a higher damage output, and that does matter. Even if you aren't getting the best damage output at times 3 because the damage is going down, the sheer volume of fire is great for certain scenarios. Close quarters, you're just hip firing with times 3 and you're spraying the crap out of whatever enemy is in front of you. Not to mention, at the end of the day, this is still like a pretty good auto rifle overall. 40 rounds in the magazine, not to mention you can slap on a Rampage spec or even a backup mag for more rounds in the magazine. You can put on a mod, which, you know, with an exotic, even though this has a super unique, almost exotic-like perk, you know, an exotic you wouldn't be able to put on a mod. With this, you can, so that's pretty beneficial. Not to mention that if you're strapped for resources, this comes fully masterworked, so you can be producing tons of orbs, which actually matters a little bit more now with Season of Dawn than it did previously, because there's the seasonal mod that lets you become charged with light for picking up an orb of light, and masterwork orbs are by far the easiest orb of light to produce. So you can easily slay out with the Breakneck, kill a bunch of red bars, get a bunch of orbs, and become charged with light to do additional damage or get your melee back or whatever amount of crazy synergies and benefits you want from those absolutely wacky Season of Dawn mods. With all of that being said, the Breakneck is definitely not an easy or, in frankly a lot of people's cases, enjoyable weapon to unlock if you haven't gotten it already. It's going to be a lot of Gambit grinding to get this weapon, and therefore the question is really, is it worth it if you don't have it already? And frankly, is it worth it to start using if you haven't been using it? Well, I'm not exactly sure, because there are some really, really powerful legendary auto rifles that don't require like 40 Gambit games that you can farm for quite easily, especially, again, I mentioned the Steel Feather Repeater earlier in the video, that getting multi-kill clip and feeding frenzy, and I have that roll and it's absolutely disgusting. And the thing is, you can keep up multi-kill clip ×3 very, very regularly with that gun. It's benefiting from the 20 to 30% PvE damage increase from Shadowkeep, obviously. And, you know, it's not having some weirdness about going down in damage. Like, multi-kill clip just increases damage. Other auto rifles with Rampage, they just increase in damage. You don't have to worry about this weirdness going on like you do with the Breakneck, where basically you're punished for getting more kills. In this case, your damage will go down substantially. And in that respect, I actually don't think this buff did too much for the Breakneck. The fact that it's so strange, the fact that you are getting an actual pretty significant increase when you have Rampage ×2, because yes, it's an 11% damage increase, but it's 11% more damage over a much slower rate of fire. So you're doing more damage and firing much, much, much faster. So you are DPSing like crazy at ×2, but like you get one kill and it's all gone. You're back at ×3. It's going to be really weird to get this gun to ×2. The one thing I will mention with that, however, is that with this knowledge, like after watching this video, now knowing that ×2 is the place to be, and you know, discovering that for myself, it's going to influence the way you play. And you can do some things where you get a few kills, and then once you have Rampage ×2 with the Breakneck, that's the time to fight the major, right? Like Rampage ×2 is your golden moment, and that's when you start DPSing bigger enemies. You take those guys down when your gun is at its most lethal, right? But it's still such a strange slew of information and updates, and again, it's really not that much better, in my experience using it, than other phenomenal legendary auto rifles out there. And so guys, there you have it. All the info on one of the strangest gun updates we've seen in Destiny history. Guys, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed, found this informative. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at @RickKackis. That's linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.